All right, settle down, you radishes. I know, it's that time of year. Every time I forget that I should leave town, have you ask someone else to try to tell it. God knows I'm not the storyteller you tell me I am, and you should know it well enough by now.
It's your bloody
I
story.
suppose it's my duty. Okay, let me just finish this drink, and I'll start. Lachlan, Lord of the Lights a little, would you? Thanks, that'll do. Okay. And must I begin the same way every time? Perhaps I must, if it's your first time in the tavern and I do see some unfamiliar faces. Well, as most of you know, this isn't my story, but it is my father's. And I remember like it was last week, the day he came home, how my mother had made me tiptoe around for clear on 2 weeks, as all he did was sleep and pace around the house like a ghost, checking the windows, though we lived far out in the country. It'd be years before I heard the story, sneaking down from my bedroom and pressing my ear to the kitchen door as my father told it to a good friend of his who happened by. Perhaps some details slipped my mind, but this is the story I remember my father told. I will tell it now in his voice. Here we go. This is the tale of Barnacle Harry.
The ship's name was the Raven, and it could hold a good 45 strong, along with all of its supplies and the rum it was running from the northeastern bristles across the Atlantic. I was hired out of a good deal of desperation my own, as we were to lose our farm if I didn't get some money fast, since our crop had failed. The man who referred me knew my father had been a sailor and assumed I had it in me. I did nothing to correct him. That was my mistake. I onboarded to murmurings, rumors of a nefarious prisoner on board. The captain of the Raven, a certain Captain Rusk, was also reputed as a former pirate who had been forgiven by the crown recently. A large man, his features swallowed by a black bushel of a beard like a swallow's nest. Cross his gaze and you knew well enough to go about your way. That kind of man. I was not used to this kind of ship, nor the storm we set sail into, and so late that first night my upset stomach forced me to come onto deck to chunder, as they say. It was there I saw Captain Rusk with 3 men hoisting a barrel, easily the size of a man, onto the side and overboard, where I was lurching lightheaded over the lip. I could see a large man-shaped thing tumble forth from the barrel's hollow. The barrel fell then and exclaimed onto the water below. Strangely, the shape of the man seemed to disappear into the darkness.
Do you hear 1 or 2 splash?
One of the men said.
2 must be,
said another. Captain Rusk had already lit his pipe somehow amidst the gale. He spotted me and seemed to sip me in with his pipe smoke, his eyes glowing from his still-lit match, which sent me nervously off back to my quarters. That night, as we got further out to sea, the storm abated. In my bunk, I could hear music and merriment somewhere above, no doubt from the captain's quarters. It felt odd to celebrate so early in our voyage. Perhaps it was due to leaving the storm behind, or perhaps it had to do with the man they tossed overboard. Who could he have been, I thought? What a terrible death that must be. Was that something I should be afraid of happening to me? I was filled with regret with my decision, but I committed myself to being ever present, ever vigilant, and God willing, one day make it home to my wife and little ones. I said a prayer that night for the first time, truly, in a while. The next day felt like nothing was unusual, though we were managing through a thick fog that made it difficult to see further than a few feet ahead on deck. I got a plate of breakfast and coffee and was proud of my balance as I walked with it, but half of it was quickly disregarded off the bow as a man came running past me shouting for the captain. Something told me that I shouldn't have kept going in that direction, but my stomach was aching, and I wanted to arrive at the main deck where I could sit and imbibe before the work started. I thought at first that it was the sail hanging and swaying before me a few feet ahead in the mist, pale as the shape was. But a few feet more and I saw what it was, a man, pale as ice, hanging down from a rope tied above, his shirt half open and blackened with blood, and unmistakably puncture wounds on his bare neck. Needless to say, I went hungry that day, and my stomach would never recover, not truly for years, I'd say. They had a man named Tino the Trapper walk the plank that day. He had been found with blood on his shirt and passed out from drink. It made little sense, except that perhaps he was a cheated cards and that the captain had it in for him. Though small, he was wiry and strong, but not a man with any bit of common sense would grant him capable of killing another man that size and hoisting him in the dead of night like that. Remarkably little changed that night. There was music again in the captain's quarters, though now it was significantly less enthusiastically attended, at least from the sounds of it. I heard rumblings in the quarter across from me, so I went to investigate. "Did you see the body before they gave it its rights?" one voice said. "I did not, but Jim Canary did. Said he was drained of his blood with puncture wounds on his neck."
"Surely not drained. Surely those were from a knifing or something like it. Where is Canary?"
"Drinking, of course. Telling the captain stories, I'm sure. That's why he keeps him around, lousy scab." After listening, I crept away to my bunk. I did not know the man killed, but I believe he had been keeping watch. 2 men would be there that night for security, as the presumption was the captain's life was what had been sought. Tino had it in for him, and he could have accomplices, they said. I distinctly heard the pistol shot and a scream this time, but I was not one of the brave who rushed onto the deck to investigate. One man had the distinctive puncture wounds, but the other's neck was simply broken, which made everyone presume the one had bit the other, perhaps, had been the culprit. Bit him. Why, yes. Doc Bunny, though he was not technically a doctor, but still a resident medical officer, did investigate this time and thinks the punctures were also surrounded by the contours of a mouth, the skin discolored by consistent sucking. The one, while indulging in the clearly mad behavior, must have been killed by the other, who grabbed his neck and twisted it until it broke. Remarkable, but surely the only solution.
"Not so,"
said another.
2 were friendly enough, and what if the culprit is still in the loose?
One, who had been somewhat familiar with Tino the Trapper, was already starting to feel cornered, and became quite belligerent, grasping his pistol. Captain Rust did not wait for those blocking his way to dispatch him with a bullet to his chest, whose exploding particles grazed my shoulder somehow and sent me flying almost off the ship. Things would get considerably worse for us all after that. I was blessed to sleep in the infirmary, as we call it, beside Doc Bunny that night. Blessed because the bloodshed escalated greatly. The 4 men found that morning were laid on top of each other, almost as if the killer wanted to flaunt how much time he had before anyone could possibly discover him. Not a single shot had been shot that night, and the anxious creak of the bow, now eerily present, must have concealed their screams. Everyone was gathered on the deck, and Captain Rusk looked positively haggard and perhaps afraid. It was deduced that more than one man was at fault for these killing, else he was a powerful man by the looks of it. The captain had us line up by height and build, which made for much consternation. I did not try to appear larger or smaller than I was, and as I was somewhere in the middle, I did not try to worry myself. After all, Doc Bunny could vouch I had been in the infirmary next to him. Alas, as Captain Rusk walked by, he stopped right in front of me.
"Who are you?"
said the captain. "My name is Lee, Captain. I was brought in by Travis Barker in Bristol. Captain," I said as clearly as I could.
"I remember you,"
the captain spoke under his breath.
"I remember you. You were there the night we tossed him overboard, Lee, were you not?"
I hesitated, but answered truthfully. "Yes, Captain." The captain then got real close to me, intimate-like, almost at a tremble.
"Was there 1 or 2 splashes then?"
Despite all the hubbub, the captain returned to his quarters then, leaving the company befuddled in a line. Everyone looked at me, like I had told some witchcraft to the captain, and seemed to turn their backs to me. As I returned below deck, I startled as a hand grabbed my arm.
"Easy now, boy,"
said Doc Bunny.
"There, let's go see to your wound. You'll need new dressing."
In the safety of the infirmary, Doc Bunny secured the latch and began seeing to my wound. It wasn't much, though these kinds of things you never knew. I'd heard of far worse fates with far less a scratch, especially at sea. Finally, after tending to my wound, Doc Bunny looked me square in the eyes.
"Well then, you might as well tell me then, seeing as you might not have another friend on this ship. What did the captain tell you? And what, pray tell, did you tell him?"
I looked away from Bunny's gaze. I'll answer you, Doctor, if you answer me this. Who was the man, the prisoner everyone was talking about at the start of our voyage?
Well, you're in no position to bargain, but what with me tending to your wounds and every man suspicious of you now, but fair enough. As far as I know, that poor soul had drunk more than his share of rum the night before we left. Perhaps gambling was involved. I don't know the details, but rumor has the captain had been paid a large sum of money to take care of him, if you catch my drift. He's no upstanding citizen, just another dread pirate the world is rid of, at least is what I gather.
Pirate, like the captain.
You call him to his face and see what happens there now. I told you, what happened then between you and the captain?
I'll only disappoint you, Doctor. He asked if I saw the man they threw overboard. I did not. I told him as much. I don't know why the captain reacted the way he did. You can tell anyone else that's what happened too, and I'll tell them if they want. I don't want any secrecy. Seems any chance I have in surviving this voyage, I better be straight with anyone who'll listen.
You better be straight with me. I took the Hippocratical Oath, you know. I can take a man's life easier than most, don't you forget it. We'll make something up with the captain. It's not to be known that a man was thrown overboard. That's what I heard anyway. He has to be dispatched quiet-like, so don't you tell that to anyone. That'll be enough reason to dispose of you.
The next thing we knew, there was a violent rapping on the infirmary door, followed by two of the captain's heavies barging in. At first, I feared for my life, but it was fast evident that a new theory had emerged. The killer wasn't one of us, but a stowaway somewhere on the ship. We were all tasked to turn the ship inside out, search every board short of the hull, find where that rat or rats were hiding. The ship looked like it had been ransacked by pirates when we were through with it. As we passed some islands in the middle of the ocean, another thick fog descended on us. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the rear of the vessel, and we all scurried forth to see what was happening. The captain and one of his men were cocking their pistols and firing. At what it could not clearly be seen. At last the fog cleared, and I could see that 6 or so men had taken to one of our dinghies and were rowing like mad to the shore of an island in the distance. Finally, the captain stopped his men from firing.
Cease fire! No matter. They've damned themselves. If they don't die from the locals, they'll be bitten by snakes on that one. I won't waste cannon fire.
You think the killer was with them, Captain?
Asked a heavy.
Who says I'm not the killer?
At that, the captain started to laugh maniacally before shooting his pistol once more in the air, almost grazing the air as he passed. That night 10 men stood watch, and we were all instructed to come up as soon as we heard anything. And here's something we did. Explosions and shouts cacophonous. Duck Bunny and I stood safely in a hollow to watch the total madness. A few men had evidently tried to detach the remaining dinghy and tried to escape. One man lay bleeding on the ground, trying to pull a knife out of his own calf. Bunny looked to tend to him, but just then, a pistol erupted and smoke took his legs from under him.
My back!
The doctor exclaimed. I did my best to hoist him in my arms and brought him inside to safety. Back in the infirmary, he moaned in pain and made me grab some secret vial which he downed in one go, which looked inadvisable. I heard more pistol blasts above, more of the sound of blades and wood and the dull thud of flesh. I could feel my whole body trembling as I looked anxiously around for some kind of weapon. That is when the whole of the ship lurched, and I flew to the wall like a stowaway rat in a coffin. When the ship had resumed its course and the sound seemed to have settled, I tentatively breached the deck, with one of the doctor's surgery knives gripped firmly in my fist. I could hear the captain yelling somewhere. As I paced out for plainer view, I saw him there above at the wheel. Clearly, he had gotten a grip of his remaining living men.
You there, Lee! At my side, sailor! Come take the wheel!
I dropped the doctor's inadvisable blade on the deck and hopped to the captain's command. If he had wanted me dead, surely he would have done it long ago. Up there, on the quarterdeck, everything looked calm. The captain looked almost serene, looking out past the trail of hobbled men, past the sails into the horizon. He took my hand and placed it on the wheel. The sky was clear of all fog and clouds, and suddenly everything shone, including the waves.
What color is the water, Lee?
Captain? At this point, I had assumed he had grown quite mad, but he looked at me with enough clarity in his eyes that I knew he was serious. Perhaps a sapphire blue, Captain?
Close. That color is cerulean, the finest.
Now, Ultramarine, that's what we call a piece of Zuli. If I could load my ship with as much as that as I have rum, I'd never need to captain a ship in my life ever again. Wouldn't have to worry about anyone drinking it either, you follow?
I think so, Captain, I said, witnessing a man help another man pull a knife out of his leg from the corner of my eye.
You paint, Lee?
Captain? Yes, a bit. How did you know? I mean, I'm a farmer, but yes.
I saw it in your fingernails. Soil, yes, but also pigment, unmistakable. I dabble myself. Perhaps I could show you in my quarters what I've been working on. It's lost on the others, you see. Maybe you could give me your opinion.
I'd somehow forgotten we were being stalked by some mysterious demon when I entered the captain's quarters later that night. Perhaps we were resigned to our fates, or perhaps we hoped that we'd done ourselves enough damage to satisfy its thirst, or perhaps, as we began to suspect, the monster was ourselves. No, I'm only joking. We were simply very tired. I checked on the doctor before going and confirmed he was still alive, only fast asleep from whatever he'd ingested. I envied his rest. The captain parted a curtain into his antechamber. There behind it were numerous frames and canvases and paintings. When I asked if he had painted these, he laughed no. His skills were paltry, he was a collector mainly. Although his tastes were particular, I noticed that they were mostly landscapes, jungle scenes. Some were in open plains, but all had a common feature: a fountain. The captain watched me as I looked at them. "Forgive me, Captain," I said. "These are all different artists, different ages as well, but they are all... This is, what do you call it?"
That, young man, is the so-named Fountain of Youth.
The captain's eyes lit up.
As old as Greek, as timely as ever. For most it is a myth, but for me, you see, it's my work. My real work, that is. I've been in nearly every quadrant of the world, and I will continue to do so when I retire with enough money, you see. Get my own small ship and go. I have a few leads. At first I thought it was hidden in these paintings somehow. Wisdom passed on through the generations. But not too long ago, I arrived at something new.
Behind another curtain, he brought out a number of small canvases. They were the images of a man and a woman. Both were similar in their features.
This one, painted on wood, from perhaps the 12th century, you see. But this one, look how the resemblance is uncanny of the woman from the 15th, and this man here, spanning this century to all the way back. Now, I know what you're going to say. Surely a coincidence, either a copy or maybe even oddly a descendant. That's what I thought at first, but look. You too are a painter. See here. You can barely make out his name here. He signs his name here. The more recent ones. Naturally, not on the older pieces, of course, as it was not the fashion, but look at the brushstroke here. And here, and on the letter. Now look at the wood. See? Can you see how identical? A signature in more ways than one.
I looked closely at the brushstrokes for a time, and the signature, and then at the sole letter on the painted wood, the letter N. The name on the painting was hard to decipher. I looked again at the captain. He was insane, but I couldn't begrudge him his artistic curiosity. I was curious myself. There were similarities in the paintings that struck me as odd as well. I didn't want to trouble the captain that perhaps they were the work of forgery more like, or perhaps some kind of apprenticeship that had been passed on for centuries. So, this is proof to you then of what, Captain?
Of immortality, young man. Whether these do, or only the painter forever immortalizing the woman he loves, so you see, my quest is not to find the fountain any longer. It's to find the man.
Thunder on the horizon. Lightning struck visibly through the porthole. The men outside struggled with the mainsail. We were going through rough waters. At starboard side, I saw a man look over the bow, and suddenly he was yanked straight out into the void. "We have a man overboard, but it's too late, I think. The man, the monster, I think he's been on the side of the ship all along, clinging to it."
Like a barnacle.
the captain noted, smiling, his gaze telling me he was somewhere else. The ship pulsed and rocketed forward. A few brave sailors steadied our course, and the rest scurried below deck. Lightning struck mere feet from our hull. I couldn't help but peer into the darkness, and if I saw it 3 times in a row, I wouldn't have believed it, as I saw a shape of a man leap out from overboard, up, and scurry up the mainsail like a bat out of hell. "He's here, Captain!" I rushed inside where a few of his heavies had gathered. I closed the door with great anxiety, but suddenly with vigor, I latched it firmly. I saw him. Something supernatural, a demon. He's climbed up the masthead, that is how...
Quiet, lad!
The captain bellowed.
You lot, pistols out! Light the mast on fire! I want that thing down! It can't have better sea legs than us! We're goddamn pirates, aren't we?
Something about the captain calling himself a pirate gave the 2 heavies the courage to charge out into thunder and rain, and something in me was ready to charge with them, but the captain grabbed me by the scruff of the neck before I could.
Hold on there, lad. I'm the captain for a reason. And you're an artist, aren't you? That's more valuable than gold. I think I have an assistant in my quest, do I not? Someone who can tell brushstrokes will be more valuable to me than these deck swabbers. Come, let's have a drink like gentlemen.
At this point, you may have given up on believing that the captain had any sanity left. What with our very lives being threatened by this monster outside, half the crew below deck oblivious. But with all we'd been through, I found the sight of the captain opening a bottle of rum, a very welcome one. He drank, and I drank, and he, and then I, until my head was swimming so much, the boat almost seemed to steady. The sounds of the thunder and lightning and rain must have blocked out the sounds of the fight outside, because we were both oblivious when the door broke open with a kick of a well-placed bare foot. The captain had his pistol ready, and the man seemed to absorb its fire like it was nourishment.
He was tall and mighty-looking and tattered and very wet, but he was decidedly not one of us. He fixed his eyes on the captain, and there in the glimmer of a lightning strike I saw them, his fangs, as he lunged towards him, disarming him of his knife and sinking into the captain's neck, almost as a mercy, like a dark pirate's embrace.
In no rational way, instead of scurrying out into the deck, I fell into the captain's antechamber and huddled by the paintings, those of the immortal ones in the fountains, as if their powers would save me. And indeed they did. When we settled into the storm, and the alcohol settled in my system and my mind started to clear, I could feel the distinct pull of the ship being turned sharply back, from whence we came. As I found out, the rest of the men had fled to the ship's jail and locked themselves there. Doc Bunny eventually awoke and found himself on the deck, entering the captain's quarters, somehow relaxed, where I still sat, frozen in time, in fear and disbelief. His back seemed fine.
There you are. Well, Lee, I told you I'd get out of it alive. Seemed well... Oh.
A new figure appeared in the doorway, dressed cleanly and distinguished. But unmistakably it was him. His presence took my breath away.
Ah, yes. Have you met? Seems we're going home, as we have a new captain.
You can call me Harry,
said the figure. My hand, which had been braced against the painting, slipped, and I fell to my side awkwardly, slipping off some of the fabric off one of the portraits, the one of a woman.
And what do we have here?
He approached the paintings. I got to my feet, looked anxiously round, but somehow the captain's body was nowhere to be found. I could see unmistakably our new captain was wearing his clothes somehow. My mind doesn't remember how it happened. The man, the monster, Harry, leaned down and looked at the painting, seemingly transfixed. Finally, he turned to me, looking satisfied.
Your work?
No, Captain. Definitely not. I'm but an amateur, a farmer, really. I don't know what I'm doing here, to be honest.
Likewise, I'm sure,
said the distinguished monster.
Well, he continued, we'll be returning this rum to the islands for a start, and then I'll have you return this ship home. How does that sound? I'm sorry I didn't catch your name.
Drake, sir. Leopold Drake.
Well, Quartermaster Drake, then it is. I'll be taking these portraits into my possession as well. I quite like them, but maybe not these landscapes. If you'd care for them, the doctor will see to the men below deck. He'll be happy to know you won't be all alone on your voyage home. Not quite.
So that's where the story ends. I never could quite tell what my father truly thought of this man who legend calls Barnacle Harry. Clearly he was not a normal mortal, more monster than man, but surely some of him was man as well. My father abandoned the ship when they got back home. I heard later they simply docked it in the middle of the bay and swam to shore, so rattled were they by any repercussions for their perceived failure, or to be implicated in the missing rum. But then again, he must have had some way off the ship, because I can't imagine him swimming with the painting I still have in my home all the way to shore. So then that's it. And if my son ever comes home, I will hope he'll keep telling this story too. Until then, Lachlan, one more before I go home.